everyone. Thank you so much for attending our disaster preparedness webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Katie and I work with Vinteum software. We also have my colleague here, Hercule, who will be working as our moderator today.
That's right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Hercules. I'll be your moderator today, so please feel free to send in your questions or anything that you guys want to know. We'll be really happy to answer everyone. Okay?
Absolutely, yes. Hercules will be watching that question box, so please send in questions throughout the presentation if you have them. We'll also do a large Q&A at the end as well, so just make sure that if anything is unclear here, we're happy to clarify for you. But today we will be discussing disaster preparedness, so how you can best prepare your community association for any type of natural disaster here. So we'll take a look at questions you need to be asking yourself as a board member, information that you can gather ahead of time, and communication strategies to help with your residents during the event as well. We're also going to be talking about Neigbrs, which is our HOA and condo management software. It goes a long way to streamline communication when you do have some type of software platform that you're relying on here. So again, we'll do some demonstrations of some of the features that Neigbrs has here, just so that you can really see how that can complement your disaster preparedness efforts. With that being said, let's take a look at our agenda for the day. So first off, we'll take a look at building an emergency preparedness plan. So what are the first steps that you need to take as a board member to prepare your community association? And then we'll take a look at key components of an effective plan. So we'll take a look at specific information that you should be gathering, specific ways to share that information with your residents. And then again, we'll touch on our communication strategies. So it can vary whether it is leading up to an emergency event, during the emergency event, as well as during recovery efforts after. So we'll take a look at communication strategies for all of these different scenarios. And then we'll also take a look at tools for coordination. So again, we'll take a look at some of the features that Neigbrs can offer to really streamline your communication during these emergency events. So we'll take a look at features like virtual meetings, smart calling, and many, many more. And we do have a special gift for all of our attendees here today, so we'll take a look at what that is at the end of the presentation here, but definitely something that you're going to want to stick around for. But first off here, let's talk about the urgency of preparedness. So why you as a board member should be prioritizing this in the year of 2025. I know that if you've been paying attention to the news this year, you have probably noticed that we are experiencing all types of natural disasters across the country. So whether you are located in California and you've been dealing with wildfires, whether you're located in Florida and you're dealing with hurricanes, there are lots of different aspects that you need to consider pretty much no matter where you're located. So taking a look here, as you can see, again, we have seen a few different natural disasters that have affected communities across the US. So in Hurricane Milton, I know we have a lot of Floridians here in attendance today. So a lot of you were probably personally affected by Hurricane Milton. We saw that there was over $50 billion in damages done and over 1.5 million residents left without power during that disaster. So you can really see the major impact there. Across the US as well, the state of Texas declared an emergency due to wildfires. Minneapolis declared an emergency due to blizzard-like conditions, and we are still waiting on reports for the damages for the LA wildfire since that was a little bit more recent, but I have heard numbers around the $30 billion range as well. The piece that stands out to me the most on this screen is that 40% of residents in affected areas of Hurricane Milton reported not receiving timely alerts. So even though throughout the government we have a lot of emergency communication protocols, a lot of news channels were covering the storm and any updates here, it still was not enough to get residents prepared for the impact of the disaster here. So that really just goes to show why communication is absolutely key when it comes to preparing your association. So that will be a big focus today as your communication plans here. And let's talk about the impact on community associations. So as a board member, you do have a responsibility to the members of your community association to do your best to prepare residents ahead of time. Now, this does not mean that you can divert the path of a hurricane or anything like that, but you should be gathering information ahead of time and sharing that with your residents to really make sure that your community association is prepared in the best possible way. So let's take a look at some steps that you can take and how you actually approach building your HOA emergency preparedness plan. I know it can seem a little bit overwhelming, but we'll break it down step by step for you to really make sure that you're understanding how you can approach gathering this information. So step one here, this will be defining roles and responsibilities. This is absolutely key because each member of your association will understand what their responsibilities are during the event of a disaster. So this is going to allow for swift action. You don't have to waste time figuring out coordination when everyone knows what they're supposed to do and what their next steps are. So again, not only is it going to allow you to act quickly, it's also going to split the workload. Not everything needs to fall on the board president's shoulders, for example. This is going to allow you to split up those points of contact and those action items amongst board members and other community members here. You should also be creating routine inspections throughout your community association. So this is going to allow you to stay on top of the condition of all of the infrastructure across your community here. So if there is any infrastructure concerns, you can best prepare the structure for any type of natural disaster here. And this is also going to be your only recourse when it comes to insurance information. So you are going to want to have these photos as proof for your insurance company for any types of repairs that may need to happen here. So this is absolutely a key piece when it comes to organizing information and getting that prepared ahead of time. Now, circling back to Neighbors here, this is a great example of how you can utilize a community management platform like Neighbors to store and organize this information so that it's easily accessible for your residents. So we'll take a look here briefly at our document repositories tool. So as you can see here, we can store all types of your communal documents within this folder, not just limited to disaster preparedness, but for the sake of the demo today, we're going to focus primarily on this disaster information. So as you can see here, we can store all of this information in your disaster preparedness folder. That way residents know exactly where to go within the platform to find this information. And you can share all types of information here. So again, those community inspection photos that we were talking about that are super key when it comes to insurance information. You can even store information like your insurance coverage here. You should also be providing sitemap and evacuation plans that are updated at the very least yearly for your residents. So again, storing them here makes it really easy to track down that information. And you can also store information like a board member action plan and manage those levels of access here. So keep in mind that if there are any more sensitive documentation that residents shouldn't have access to, you can always narrow that down just for board members.
So, Katie, we got a question here. Ashley. Ashley is asking if the this document storage is the one that the new Florida website law talks so much about, and if they would be compliant if they had something like this. Or she's asking if this is something that a Google Drive or any other storage could fulfill. Can you talk to us a little more about that?
Great question. Great question. So, in terms of Florida compliance, I know that there have been a lot of changes with those new laws, especially in Florida. I know some of other states like Texas, Colorado have had some laws coming out within community associations. But just so you're aware, especially for Florida, we are 100% compliant. So, a big piece of that Florida House Bill 1203 did circle back to allowing residents to have access to certain pieces of information here. So while we're focusing primarily on disaster preparedness, that's also going to cover information like your governing docs and bylaws, financial history of the community association. So the short answer is yes, you are fully compliant. You can store all of this information so that it is easily accessible for your residents here. So this will meet all of those requirements for the Florida statutes. I think really the advantage here of utilizing something that is more specifically for community associations as opposed to a generic tool like Google Drive is it's really going to allow you to again manage levels of access based on roles within the community, whether a resident is an owner or a tenant. So it's just a lot more specific to the parameters that you'll need for a community association, whereas some of those more general tools don't have quite the same level of customization there. So really it just allows you to kind of be a one-stop shop for all of your information regarding the association.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said here, we'll go ahead and take a look at step two, which is risk assessment. So as we discussed here, there's all types of natural disasters that can affect you depending on your geographic location. So if you live further north, you may need to be worried more about blizzard and snow conditions. If you live somewhere where wildfires or earthquakes are common, that's something that you should be taken into account here. So the first most important piece here is to identify what types of disasters you will be at risk for here. So this can inform the types of plans that you have, the routes for evacuation that are going to be optional here, the types of things that residents may do to prepare in terms of water or power outage as well. So this is really key in terms of identifying your next steps. And there's a few different questions that you need to ask yourself no matter what type of disaster you're going to be affected by here. So first off, you should be asking yourself what vendors will need when this scenario happens. So you should have up-to-date contact information and pre-identified vendors for all types of services here. So whether that is going to be structural damage to the infrastructure, whether that's going to be tree removal and debris removal, you should have all of that information up to date. You should know exactly who is going to reach out to those vendors and ensure that you have all of that information ready to go so that you can get those recovery efforts started as soon as possible. You should also understand your insurance coverage. It is absolutely imperative that you are reviewing your insurance policies at minimum annually, ideally more often than that, but you really need to make sure that your insurance coverage is sufficient for the types of damages that you can be affected by here. It really has seen a lot of issues with insurance over the past year, so this is absolutely imperative. That also comes back to preparing ahead of time, so those inspection photos, again, oftentimes are really your only recourse with insurance companies. So make sure that you have all of that information prepared ahead of time. You should also understand who the points of contact are. So this kind of goes back to identifying those individual roles and responsibilities here. You should know which board members will be in charge of contacting which vendors, who is going to be communicating with emergency response teams in the event of evacuation, and who residents should expect to hear from and be able to reach out to with any questions here. Speaking of residents, you should also identify how you're going to protect residents. So outside of sharing information like the site map and evacuation plan here, you should also be identifying vulnerable residents. Now, what do I mean when I say vulnerable residents? This is anyone within your community association that may need extra support in the event of a disaster. So this can be any sort of disability or mobility impairment, any types of hurdles to communication, whether it's technology limitations or any other type of limitations there. So you need to know who those folks are, and you need to have a plan for that extra support to ensure that everyone can get to safety. And you need to assess the possible damages on your community association as a whole. So you need to look at the health of your infrastructure and what you need to do to get that prepared. Again, insurance information is very, very important there. You need to have that plan for your residents, so identifying who those vulnerable residents are, how you're going to communicate in the sake of an emergency, and you also need to be prepared for the financial impact on your association. Have a good understanding of where your reserve funds are, exactly where those due payments are going, so that if you do need any type of emergency services after or recovery services, you have a plan of action there. And then step 3 here is going to be to get certified. So FEMA provides the CERT Community Emergency Response Team program. So we call that CERT for short. And CERT essentially allows anyone within your community association, so whether you're a board member or just a member, you can actually go through the CERT program here. And this is going to prepare you for the event of disaster. You can actually become a certified emergency response team member. So that way you are going to be best prepared when it comes to handling any types of natural disasters here. So this is going to help you coordinate evacuations, both with residents and with local authorities and first responders. It's also going to allow you to provide emergency first aid. So that can be life-saving and very, very important. And it's also going to help you after the fact be able to assist with damage assessment and reporting for those damages as well.
Katie, we have a question here. Jane is asking, how long does CERT training take and what does it involve?
Great question. So CERT training takes anywhere from 20 to 30 hours in total, but don't feel like that's going to be a full-time job for that period of time. That can be split over the course of a period of weeks or months if you would like to here. And really, it's just going to take attending those training sessions. So we'll share some more information with you about your local chapters through FEMA. There is a website where you can actually just enter your zip code, and that's going to show you the local chapter for your location so that you can actually get involved and start attending those sessions.
Great, thank you. Also, Penny is asking, do we need to have medical or emergency experience to join CERT?
Great question. So, absolutely not. Really, the goal of CERT is to provide that training from the ground up. So, you do not need to have any sort of background in emergency response, medical training. They are going to get you fully trained up in those aspects. So, absolutely, even if you don't have a background in it, it's something that they will get you trained up for.
Great. And she has another question. She's asking if the members can be held liable if something goes wrong during an emergency.
Great question. So, no, you as a board member or any member of the CERT program cannot be held liable. You are actually protected under Good Samaritan laws, which essentially protect anyone who is trying to do good. As long as you are doing your best, you will not be held liable for any injuries or damages that incur during the event of a disaster here. Great question.
Yeah, actually, we are having lots of questions regarding certification. So, uh, we are going to send an FAQ. I think that's a good idea in the email that we send after the webinar. But we are also going to add the link on the recording that will be on YouTube. So, if you're watching this video on YouTube, you can find a link there. You can just click and see a few questions and answers regarding the certification. Okay? Yeah, so I think that we can move on. We are going to make sure that all of your questions will be answered. Okay?
Perfect. I'm glad that there was so much engagement. This CERT program is something that I really love and really want to make sure that everyone is aware of. So exactly like Hercules says, we'll follow up with some FAQs, but really appreciate the engagement there. And now we'll move into essential components of your plan. So we'll provide a checklist here of all of the information that you need to prepare ahead of time to get yourself ready for any type of emergency disaster here. So first off, let's go through some of your must-have elements. So first off, you should absolutely have up-to-date emergency contact information. So all of this information, you know exactly who you need to contact in the event of emergency for your residents. You should also have an updated list of residents. So not only should you have their up-to-date contact information, that way you can reach out to them during the event of an emergency, but you should also know who is within the community association and who you need to account for in the event of a disaster or an evacuation here. As I've already touched on a couple of times, you should absolutely have an up-to-date site plan as well as an evacuation map here. So this should always be accessible for residents. They need to know exactly the route that they're going to take in the event of an emergency. You should also identify not only just any type of shelter, but specifically pet-friendly shelters. Residents need to know not only how to safely evacuate, but also where they can go for safety after the evacuation process. So you should be looking up those pet-friendly shelters, sharing that information with residents. That way they have their plan of action ahead of time. We've already touched on this as well here, but we really need to get that updated vendor and insurance information. So again, understand who you're going to reach out to for any types of damages or repairs, debris removal, and understand exactly what your insurance coverage is and make sure that that is going to be sufficient for the types of disasters that you may be impacted by. And again, you should always identify vulnerable residents. So any of those residents that may need extra support and extra help when it comes to evacuations or just communication during the event of an emergency. And keep in mind here that a platform like Neighbors allows you to centralize all of this information. So in addition to sharing documents, we can also share information or store information about your residents. So we can actually store all of that contact information for your residents, all of their emergency contacts as well. They can even register pets, so you know exactly who needs those pet-friendly shelters. So keep in mind here that a platform or a technology system like Neighbors is a great way to streamline this checklist here and make sure that all of that information is easily accessible and doesn't take extra time for you as a board member during the event of a disaster here.
Yeah, we're having a few questions here, and I just want to make sure I'll take the freedom to answer this question. So, Neighbors is a platform that is within the website. So we provide the website that the community is like. Of course, it's going to depend on the state, but many communities, like I believe that almost all of them, need to have or even should have their websites. So we provide the website, and of course Neighbors is the platform within the website. So with Neighbors you would have both, right? So we're having many questions regarding that. So it's kind of two things at once, best of both worlds. So
Absolutely, yeah.
that's the answer.
Great point, Hercules. I always kind of like to describe Neighbors as having sort of two sides of the software. We have our public facing website, so that's where any information that you want to be available to the general public about the association can be found. And then, exactly like Hercules mentioned, Neighbors is the actual platform behind that is only for the residents of your association. And that's where you can store things like your documents, your contact information, and really ensuring that you have that plan accessible and ready for your residents here. So, great point. Um, and really kind of circling back to that here, I also wanted to touch on effective communication. So as we saw with Hurricane Milton, communication can be a major issue when it comes to disaster preparedness, with over 40% of affected residents saying that they did not receive timely alerts. It really shows us why communication is absolutely essential. The plan can't work if residents don't know about it. So you really need to make sure that you are being proactive with your communication. So for best practices here, always try to communicate through omni-channel alerts here. So you never know what types of channels you can rely on during a disaster event. Sometimes internet or cell coverage can be down. So if you're reaching out through multiple different channels, it increases the odds of residents actually receiving that message and being able to stay in the loop here. It also allows you some options to communicate with less tech-savvy residents. So for example, our smart calling feature within Neighbors allows you to reach residents directly through a phone call, so they don't have to worry about accessing information on an app during a high-stress situation. And again, this is the best way to really ensure that all of your residents are receiving the information, no matter which channel they're receiving it on here. So as I mentioned earlier, you can use technology to centralize and streamline all of this communication. So we'll take a look at that smart calling tool that I just mentioned here. So this is the ability to send out a phone call blast to your residents. Keep in mind that we do have our sister feature, which is the text message tool. That functions in exactly the same way here. The only difference is whether residents receive it via text or via phone call. So to send out any of these messages here, you'll go ahead and click this green add button. You'll select the name of your community. And if you do want to narrow it down to certain individuals within your association, you can actually narrow it down further here. You'll give it a title so that you know exactly what this smart call was pertaining to. And then the actual the actual message the residents will receive will be typed here. Again, keep in mind that if you do the text message tool, they'll receive it as a written text. If you send that smart calling tool, they will receive it as a robotic phone call, relaying that message. And our smart call feature does reach out to both landlines as well as mobile phones. So if you do have any residents that aren't able to receive text through a mobile line, you can still reach out through a landline here. And hopefully that is going to provide some time savings during the event of emergency. It really only takes a few clicks to get that information out to your residents here. Now, let's take a look at our different communication strategies. So as I touched on at the beginning of our presentation here, communication strategies are going to vary depending on where you're at in the timeline of an emergency. So during the preparation beforehand, during the actual emergency event, and then the recovery efforts after the event. So let's take a look at each of those aspects here and how you can really customize your communication plan for each of those steps. So first off, before the emergency, keep in mind that being proactive is absolutely key here. So in addition to the information that we've already touched on, you should be organizing educational meetings at a minimum twice a year, if not more often. This is going to allow you to share the most updated information with your residents. So as there is new information regarding shelter locations or evacuation routes, you can ensure that residents have the most up-to-date plan as far as this emergency preparedness. It's also going to be a good opportunity to allow you to review things like your insurance coverage and your vendor relationships here. And this also allows for any newer members to your community association to stay in the loop here. When you have these meetings every 6 months, it really allows to not only refresh the memory of residents who have been there for a while, but also allows for participation from newer residents here. You should absolutely share emergency plans with residents. So again, whether that is through a platform like Neighbors, I think that is the best and simplest way to share that information. They should easily be able to find this information. So they should always know where things like the site map and evacuation plan live. They should understand the board members' contact information and who they should be contacting in the event of an emergency. So keep in mind that this is very clearly shared with your residents. And again, you should modernize your technology for proactive communication. So keep in mind here that in the event of emergency, you are not going to have a lot of extra time to spare when you're wanting to send out this information. So a platform like Neighbors allows for that communication to go a lot smoother and a lot faster. So for example, with our notices tool within Neighbors, this is a great way to send out any information via email to your residents. So for example, when you have those emergency preparedness meetings twice a year, you can actually send out that information as a follow-up to your residents here. So as you can see, I've included information like a damage report form, a site map, and evacuation plan here as attachments. And I've also let residents know where they can navigate to within the Documents tab to actually find that information. So that way you can be aware that residents are receiving this information not only via email, but they actually know where to track it down within the portal here. So this is going to allow you to make sure that residents are in the loop. I think over communicating is always better than leaving questions out in the open here. And then let's take a look at communication during the emergency. So we understand that while these emergencies are happening, no matter what type of disaster it is, it can be a very high stress situation. So ensure that you are using those multi-channel alerts. So with Neighbors, you can communicate through text, phone call, email, and push notification through our app. So this is going to allow residents to receive that information, even if there's things like internet or cell phone outages. You should also keep your tone clear, calm, and concise. So during these disasters, residents are going to look to you as a board member for leadership, and they really need to ensure that there's someone that is being level-headed, that is kind of leading the charge here. And this is really where that preparation comes in. If you've done all of your job kind of preparing ahead of time and each resident knows exactly what their role is in a disaster emergency, this is going to allow you to stay a little bit more clear, calm, and concise here. You can also use visual aids because I know a lot of times you want to convey information clearly and quickly. So visual aids are a great way to keep residents on the same page and send that information out in a concise manner. And keep in mind here that you should always be sending up-to-date status announcements. So do not wait for your residents to ask you for information. As soon as you have updates, you should be pushing that out, again, through omni-channel alerts. I'll tell a quick story about one of our current clients, Riverstead Community Association. They are located in North Carolina, and they were heavily, heavily affected by the flooding after Hurricane Helene. Through the course of 4 days, they sent over 30 notices, text messages, and smart call blasts to their residents. They were keeping them informed of things like power outages, road closure, flooding conditions. They were using these notices to coordinate evacuation efforts. So this was a really great example of how you can utilize a platform like Neighbors to save lives during these types of events here. And then what should you do after the emergency? So there is going to be lots of to-dos on your list if you are a board member. So keep in mind here that board members should be accessible for resident inquiries. So again, this comes back to identifying those roles. You should understand who is going to be the point of contact for residents to reach out to about things like damage reports and inquiries regarding vendors here. You should also, again, provide updates on recovery efforts. So proactively communicate with your residents. Let them know as soon as you have vendors lined up for things like debris removal or other types of infrastructure repairs here. And circling back to that, you should absolutely be organizing things like debris removal and repairs. So again, circling back to all of your vendor information, you have those up-to-date vendor contacts here. This is going to allow you to take action quickly to ensure that your community can get back to normal as soon as possible. And let's take a look here at some tools for coordination. So again, how you can leverage technology to really streamline this process, especially when it comes to reconciling those damages after the fact here. So first off, you can call emergency board meetings during the event of a disaster. So first off, what is an emergency board meeting? An emergency board meeting can be called as a special type of board meeting. You don't need 48 hours pre-notice here, but this happens when there are urgent matters to address within the association. So this definitely falls under the category of damages and repairs here. The board member are going to need to get connected to understand how they're going to reach out to insurance, how they're going to coordinate with vendors here. And these meetings can be allowed in a few different formats. Typically, they are allowed in virtual, in-person, or hybrid, so really any mixture of all of those aspects here. I definitely recommend having some sort of remote meeting tool, though, that you can utilize, just because it is going to be hard to get everyone in person. You never know where folks went to evacuate, and you never know how things like road closures are going to affect travel here. So when you have the option to meet remotely, it allows you to act a little bit more swiftly. So for example, within Neigbrs, we actually have a direct Zoom integration built into the software here. So if we jump down here to our meeting tool, this is going to allow us to create and generate a Zoom meeting directly from our Neighbors portal here. As soon as we click that it is an online meeting, that will go ahead and generate our Zoom link, and residents will actually be able to join that meeting directly from their Neighbors portal. They don't need any sort of external access link here. Keep in mind that you can include the agenda ahead of time. You can take live meeting minutes during that meeting here, and you can even vote live within that meeting as well. So keep in mind that this really streamlines your communication process and allows for board members to call those emergency meetings swiftly and make those decisions that need to happen here.
Yeah, Katie. So, Brian here, he just wanted to share something. He said that last year, his community used Zoom for virtual meetings and that it was really helpful during Hurricane Milton. So, yeah, it just kind of meets what we're saying, right? So this type of emergency meetings, they are, highly important. And again, we do have this Zoom integration, and in one of our plans, like you don't have to pay anything extra for that. So like Brian, you could save that money from Zoom because you would have it just integrated to Neighbors. Mm.
Absolutely. Great point, Hercules. Yeah, like he mentioned, it is actually rolled into the cost of the Neighbors plan. So definitely something to keep in mind as far as cost savings here. If you are paying for any sort of external Zoom subscription or other type of service there, that would actually be rolled into the cost of Neighbors. So really allows you to, again, act a little bit more swiftly, but that is awesome to hear, Brian, that you've had some good experiences with that in the past. And then we'll take a look here at overall communication management. So I know we've explored a lot of features within Neighbors here, but this is a great way to easily manage and store all of this information for your community and make sure that communication is seamless when it needs to happen. So again, you can utilize Neighbors to communicate with residents through omni-channel alerts. So whether that is text messaging, notices through email and push notification, or smart calls for your less tech-savvy residents here. And then again, you can leverage those board meetings and document storage to ensure that you can act swiftly and store all of that information, like your vendor plans, your site map and evacuation plans, and your insurance policies ahead of time. So this is a really great opportunity to leverage technology to not only provide time savings for you as board members, but also make high stress situations a little bit less stressful when you can rely on this technology as a background here. But with that being said, as a thank you for joining us today, we wanted to give you a special gift with Neighbors. So as attendance for the webinar today, we are going to offer you 2 months off of Neighbors. So that is valid for both our annual or biennial plans here. I would love to meet with you individually to get a live demonstration scheduled. I think it's a great opportunity to explore the features of the platform in a little bit more detail, and also find the best plan that's going to be the best fit for your community association. So please reach out to me. I would love to get that scheduled, and you do not want to miss this deal. This is a great opportunity to get your association up and prepared for any type of disaster. And keep in mind here that we'll be sending out this link via email as a follow-up, and it will also be found in the YouTube description, so you can utilize that link to get your demo scheduled and take advantage of this special offer. And in conclusion here, all right, now in conclusion here, I just wanted to pull all of the information that we've discussed here today into some final points for you as some takeaways here. So first off, what are the steps to implement an effective disaster plan? If you don't take anything else from this presentation, please make sure that this slide is something that you are taking to heart here. So first off, please review and update all of your emergency plans at a minimum annually, ideally more than once a year here. But this is going to allow you to have all of your most up-to-date information, like your insurance coverage and your vendor information here. And this is also going to, again, allow residents to stay up to date and have the most up-to-date information when a disaster does strike. You should also be conducting regular training and drills. So practice makes perfect here. This is going to allow you to feel more comfortable with things like evacuations and coordination efforts during the event of an actual emergency here. And you need to ensure that all of your residents are informed and prepared. So as a board member, it is your responsibility to not only prepare this information, but to share it with your residents. Make sure that your residents do not fall under that 40%, like in Hurricane Milton, that we're not receiving timely alerts. You want your residents to be in the loop and have access to all of this information. And again, you can leverage HOA technology for seamless coordination. So utilize a platform that can be a one-stop shop for all of your information, like document storage, for all of your communication, no matter what the channel is here. So really leverage that technology to make sure that your community is as prepared as possible and that you're saving time during the event of disaster. Now we can open up the floor here for any kind of questions, anything that you were curious about that I may have touched on, or pieces that I didn't touch on here.
Yeah, okay, so we do have some questions. So these questions were sent during the whole webinar, so thanks for your patience, guys. So the first question I selected here is really important, I believe. Nancy is asking, what should we do if residents do not take the emergency plan seriously?
Great question. So I really think that having those at minimum biannual emergency meetings are the best way to convey to residents that this is serious stuff, that this is important information. So, as a board member, you can't force interest, but I think that showing that you as a board member take it seriously enough to organize those emergency preparedness meetings, to share things like evacuation routes and site maps, that is absolutely going to be key in your residents taking it seriously as well. And of course, over communication. So ensuring that your residents have access to information like site maps and evacuation plans. That way, even if they aren't taking it seriously ahead of time, they are still going to be prepared during the event of an emergency here. So again, really it just comes back to preparing and informing your residents as much as possible. Of course, you can't force that interest, but if they see that you as a board member are taking it seriously, I really do think that feeling can be contagious.
Yeah, something that we have seen working as well is talking about real life examples of communities that really used an emergency plan like this. So, and we do have some things, by the way, if you want to, we can share some real life stories with you guys. Also, one of our clients, they really, actually, they use Neighbors for it. So that's why it is so personal and endearing for me to talk about it. But they were offering some incentives for, the participation. Things like badges and, small rewards, things that would basically serve as a recognition for the efforts. So this way they could really engage like the whole community in the plan.
Absolutely. I think that is a great point, Hercules, really showing residents, what some of those incentives are and why they should actually be joining here. So I think that is awesome to hear. And I think really utilizing multiple communication channels as well, that is going to be a way to ensure that your residents, again, whether or not they think they're taking it seriously, if they're receiving information through all of these different channels, they have access to the document repository. It really, again, is going to show them that you as board members are taking the time to prepare this information, so they should be taking a look at it.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So, George, finally answering your question. Uh, George is asking, how can we handle residents who refuse to evacuate during an emergency?
Absolutely. So, again, really, as a board member, you should be educating in advance. So, letting residents know what those evacuation routes are, ensuring that they're aware of safe places to go as well. Because I think a lot of times residents may, one of the factors of refusing to evacuate may be concerns about not having a safe place to go. So, especially if they have pets or any vulnerable household members, they may not understand that there are pet friendly shelters that they can go to. You also need to identify those vulnerable residents. So, again, understanding if they have concerns about mobility or their ability to evacuate. So, as a board member, if that is one of the concerns, you should be taking extra efforts to assist those residents that may need that extra level of support. So, really understanding their concerns and why they are refusing to evacuate here, because I think there's lots of different reasons that go into those decisions by residents. So you as a board member can use your preparation in advance to assuage some of those concerns. And you can also work with authorities. So if you have a resident who is still absolutely refusing to evacuate and it has been called in your area, you should contact local authorities to let them know that there is someone who is still within that space that is not following those directions. So, as a board member, you can't forcibly remove anyone from their home, but you should be letting authorities know so that they are on the same page here. And you should document everything. You need to be documenting your efforts to reach out to them. You need to be documenting the fact that you have up-to-date insurance information and vendor information. That way you can prove as a board member that you did everything you could to try and assist during this situation. Again, you are going to be protected from liability here, but you really want to be able to show that you took the extra effort to prepare your residents ahead of time.
Yeah, that's great information, Katie. Thank you. Well, we do have lots of questions here. We're going to answer them via email because we do not have time to answer all of them, but I picked one here that I feel like would be a good closure for the webinar. Marge is saying that she lives in a in a community that is spread over a very large area. So she's asking asking for tips on how she could coordinate effectively like this uh, a community that is located in a very large area, just like hers.
Great question. So we see this a lot. We do have a lot of community associations that are very large, whether it's just landmass or they have a lot of different units to coordinate with. So I think that is a great question to ask here. And I think really you can look at it step by step here. Step number one is that you should divide your association into different zones. So that way, based on location, you can make that large, overwhelming number a little bit smaller and a little bit easier to handle. So you should assign zone leaders to each of those different sections. That way there is someone who is leading the charge and is kind of the primary point of contact for the other units within that area here. You should also utilize technology. So again, whether you're utilizing a platform like Neighbors to ensure communication, that is going to allow you to actually send out messaging based on each zone. So you can narrow down information only to zone 1, 2, 3, or 4 if there are different aspects like evacuations being called in different areas versus others. And you should also arrange for transportation ahead of time. So again, especially for any vulnerable residents that may need extra assistance here, you need to ensure that they do have a way to evacuate safely no matter where they're located within the association here. And you should also have centralized hubs. So if residents are unable to contact you through internet, phone service here, they should know where to go to physically to be able to coordinate and come together with the association. So I think identifying all of this ahead of time is really going to allow you to have the best plan of action, especially when your residents are a little bit more spread out.
Great, Katie. Thank you so much. Well, we do have many questions. I want to thank you guys so much for all the engagement. Um, I want to say again, we are going to answer each question individually. Also, if you're watching this video on YouTube, we're going to add the email here that you can send in your questions as well. We will be very happy to answer all of them, even if you're not watching live. So please feel welcome to send in your questions, okay? Yeah, I think that's the end, right, Katie?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much for joining, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk about this very important topic. I know that disaster preparedness is not necessarily the most fun topic, but it is of the utmost important when it comes to community associations. So thank you so much for your time. Please reach out to me. Please take advantage of the 2 months free off of Neighbors. I would love to connect. I would love to answer any questions you have about the platform and take a time to get personalized demonstrations scheduled as well. So please feel free to reach out. I'm here as a resource. And again, thank you so much.
Bye bye. Thank you all.